Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're diving into something pretty fascinating, and I gotta say, a little unnerving. We're looking at jewelry fraud.
Oh, yeah.
And we've got a whole stack of research here about the different types of fraud, the psychology behind it, and most importantly, how to protect yourself from it. So, whether you're a collector or just thinking about buying a special piece of jewelry for someone, this is the deep dive that will hopefully save you some money and some heartache.
It really is fascinating how jewelry fraud preys upon people's desires for luxury and their trust in experts. And, those emotions make us vulnerable to these scams.
So right out of the gate, I think it's important to kind of lay out the different types of fraud. And the first one that kind of jumps out at us is fake jewelry. And I know it sounds obvious, but it's more common than you think. We're not just talking about, costume jewelry. We're talking about fake diamonds, gemstones, even metals like gold.
And the scary part is the fakes are getting really sophisticated. With technology these days, you can have lab-grown diamonds that have the same chemical composition as natural diamonds. So telling them apart really requires specialized equipment.
So you could actually be tricked into thinking you're paying top dollar for a real diamond. And it's actually a lab-grown.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's just one example. You have fraudsters that use all kinds of tricks, like using lower carat gold or treating gemstones to enhance their appearance so they look better than they actually are.
So what's the difference? I mean, what is the difference between a lab-grown diamond and a real diamond? And why does it matter?
So a lab-grown diamond is created in a controlled environment. It mimics the process that happens over millions of years in the earth, but ultimately it's made in a lab. And so it has the same chemical composition and physical properties as a mined diamond, but it doesn't have the same rarity or history. And that difference is reflected in the price.
So it really comes down to documentation.
Exactly. Always ask for a certificate from a reputable grading laboratory, like the Gemological Institute of America, the GIA, to verify where that diamond came from.
That's a great point. Okay, so let's move on to another area that our research has shown is rife with scams. Online jewelry shopping.
Right.
I mean, it's so convenient, but it really opens up a whole world of risks.
Online, it's easy for scammers to set up these professional-looking websites that mimic well-known brands and offer these deals that seem too good to be true to lure unsuspecting shoppers in.
If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
You got it. And in the online world, you really have to be so cautious. You always want to check the website's URL to make sure it's legit.
Yeah.
Look for secure payment options, research the seller, and don't just rely on the photos or the testimonials that they have on their site.
You really have to be your own detective.
Exactly. And be wary of sellers who pressure you to buy immediately or who offer deals that are way below market value. Those are often signs that something's fishy.
Red flags. Speaking of red flags, our research also shows the risks associated with stolen jewelry. I mean, it's not just about losing a precious item. It's about feeding a much larger criminal enterprise.
Stolen jewelry is big business for organized crime. They have very sophisticated networks to move these stolen goods across borders, making them difficult to track. They target homes, jewelry stores, even individuals.
So what happens? Where does stolen jewelry end up? How does it end up back on the market?
It can often be fenced through pawn shops or sold online, which makes it harder for authorities to track.
And pawn shops themselves, We have something in our notes here called pawn shop fraud.
Yeah, pawn shops can be. While many operate legitimately, there are some that engage in unethical practices, like undervaluing jewelry to make a quick profit. They might target people who are desperate for money and need to sell their valuables quickly.
So it's like you get hit twice, right? First your jewelry's stolen, and then you get lowballed by a pawn shop.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a tough situation. Okay, another sneaky tactic that we found in the research was the switch scam. This one's really clever. It plays on distraction and sleight of hand.
This is a classic bait and switch. Imagine you're in a jewelry store trying on a necklace. The scammer might pose as another customer or even an employee, and they'll try to distract you while they swap the real necklace with a fake one.
So you leave the store thinking you got a great deal, and then later you realize you've been duped.
Exactly. It happens more often than you think. And it's not just limited to jewelry stores. This can happen at flea markets, online auctions, anywhere really.
So always be aware of your surroundings, especially when you're looking at high-value items. Don't let anyone pressure you or rush you.
If you feel like something is off, trust your instincts.
Okay, so we've talked about fake jewelry, online scams, stolen goods, and pawn shop fraud. What's next?
Well, let's not forget about insurance fraud.
Oh, yeah.
This might seem like a victimless crime, but it ultimately drives up the cost for everyone.
Oh, so?
Well, some people stage losses or exaggerate the value of their jewelry to
Yeah.
try and get a bigger payout from the insurance company.
So basically, they're lying to their insurance company.
Exactly. And this type of fraud leads to higher premiums for everyone and makes it harder for people with legitimate claims to get what they deserve.
So again, this is where documentation is so important.
Absolutely. Keep detailed records
Mm-hmm.
of your jewelry. Take photographs.
Mm.
Keep receipts and appraisal certificates. That way you can prove what you own.
Yeah, keep your jewelry documentation organized. It's a must.
It's a simple step that can save you tons of headaches in the future. It's also a good idea to get your valuable pieces appraised regularly, especially if their value has changed over time.
That's great advice. I feel like we're just scratching the surface here,
Yeah.
but we've already uncovered so much. But don't worry, we're going to keep going, and we're going to equip you with everything you need to know to stay safe in this crazy world of jewelry. But first, let's take a quick break.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Before the break, we were talking about all the ways people can get scammed in the jewelry world. But now let's shift gears a little bit and focus on how we can protect ourselves. You know what they say, knowledge is power.
That's right. And I think the first step is understanding the psychology behind these scams. Why did they work? What makes us vulnerable?
Yeah, we always think we're too smart to fall for a scam, right?
We do. But scammers are experts at manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
They know how to prey on our emotions, our desires, our trust. Jewelry represents so many things to people. Engagements, anniversaries, birthdays. All those emotions can cloud our judgment, and especially when we're excited about finding the perfect piece of jewelry, it's easy to let our guard down.
Oh, yeah, I can totally see that. I remember this one time I was traveling and I almost bought a diamond ring from a street vendor. The price was crazy low, and the guy was so charming. He's telling me all about his family business.
Classic sob story.
Exactly. And I almost handed over my money, but something just felt off, so I waited. And the next day I realized it was probably a scam. That was a close one.
Wow, yeah. That's a good example of how scammers use pressure tactics to make us act impulsively. They create a sense of urgency, like you have to buy it now or you'll miss out. But a reputable jeweler is always going to give you time and space to make an informed decision. So never let anyone pressure you into buying something you're not sure about.
No, that's a good point. So pressure tactics, that's a big red flag. What else should we look out for?
One of the biggest red flags is an unusually low price. I know everyone loves a good deal, but if it seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Like that diamond ring I almost bought.
Exactly. Scammers will often try to lure you in with prices that are way below market value. And remember, reputable jewelers have costs to cover, so they can't just give away their merchandise. So if you see a diamond necklace for a fraction of the price, you see it everywhere else. Ask yourself why. It's probably fake stolen or just really bad quality.
Okay, so be skeptical. Don't be afraid to question a price that seems too good to be true. Now let's talk about documentation. We touched on this a bit earlier, but it seems like a big deal when it comes to protecting yourself.
It's huge. Legitimate jewelers are always going to be able to provide documentation, especially for those high-value items. So things like certificates of authenticity from reputable grading labs, appraisal reports, sales receipts, these are all important for making sure a piece is real and worth what they say it is. And don't hesitate to ask to see those documents before you buy.
But it's not enough just to look at a certificate, right? You have to actually know what to look for.
Yeah, absolutely. Counterfeiters are getting good, so you got to be able to spot a fake. So look at the lab's logo, the certificate number, any security features like holograms or watermarks. And you can usually verify the certificate number on the Grading Lab's website, too.
So it's like you're doing your own little investigation.
Exactly. And if a seller doesn't want to give you the paperwork, or if they get all defensive when you ask about it, that's a huge red flag.
Got it. Okay, so red flags documentation. What about return policies? I feel like people don't pay enough attention to those.
That's a good point. A solid return policy is a sign of a good business. So if they make it hard to return or exchange something, it could be a sign that something's wrong with the jewelry.
Okay, so always read the return policy before you buy. It's your safety net if something's wrong. Now let's talk more about online shopping because we know it can be really risky.
Yeah, online shopping is a scammer's paradise. It's so easy to create a nice-looking website now, so you can't just assume a business is legit because their site looks fancy.
So how can you tell if an online store is shady?
Well, first check their URL. Does it match the name of the store? Does it start with HTTPS and have a little lock icon? That means it's secure and your information is protected.
Okay, that's a good start. Anything else?
Look at their contact information. Is there an address and phone number? Does the email look professional? If you can only contact them through like a web form, that could be a bad sign.
And what about customer reviews? Are those a good indicator?
Yeah, they can be helpful, but they can also be faked. Don't just look at the reviews on their site. Check places like Trustpilot or the Better Business Bureau. And be wary of reviews that are all super positive or that all sound the same.
It's like you have to be a detective to figure out if a website's the real deal.
Yeah, pretty much. But remember, if you're not sure, it's always better to be safe than sorry.
That's true. Okay, so we've talked about red flags, documentation return policies, and the dangers of online shopping. What else can we do to avoid jewelry scams?
One of the best things you can do is buy from trusted sources. Do your research. Look for jewelers who have a good reputation and are accredited by a legit organization like the Jewelers Vigilance Committee or the American Gem Society.
So reputation matters. It's not just about finding the lowest price. It's about finding someone you can trust.
You got it. And don't be afraid to ask a lot of questions. Where's the jewelry from? What's the quality of the materials? How was it made? A good jeweler is going to be happy to answer all your questions.
So build a relationship with your jeweler, just like you would with any other professional.
Absolutely. You want someone you can rely on, someone who's going to give you good advice and help you make smart choices for your budget.
That's great advice. So we've covered a lot of general stuff, but I think it would be helpful to talk about some specific scams. Give some real-world examples. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's look at some common scams and break them down.
Okay, perfect. Let's start with the classic traveling jewelry salesman. This is the one that usually targets tourists, right?
Yeah, it happens a lot. The scammer pretends to be a traveling salesman with an amazing deal on some high-quality jewelry, and they might even tell you a sad story, like they need to sell it quick because they're in trouble or leaving town.
Yeah, I could see how people would fall for that.
It's all about playing on your emotions. They want you to feel sorry for them and buy it right then and there, but usually the jewelry is fake or way overpriced. Once they have your money, they're gone.
That's crazy. Okay, what about designer knockoffs? I feel like that's a huge problem online.
Oh yeah, for sure. People love designer brands, and scammers know that. So they sell fake designer jewelry like Rolex watches or Cartier bracelets for a tiny fraction of the real price. They'll say they have special connections or that it's overstock, but it's all lies.
And with everyone shopping online now, it's so easy to find these fakes. So what can people do to avoid them?
The biggest thing is to be suspicious of really low prices. If a designer piece is being sold for way less than what you see at an authorized dealer, it's probably fake.
Okay, that seems to be the theme here.
It is. But also look closely at the details. The fakes are getting better, but they're not perfect. So look at the craftsmanship, the materials, the logos. And if you're not sure, have an expert check it out.
So if you want the real thing, go to a real store, even if it costs more. It's worth it for the peace of mind. Okay, what about online auctions? Are those risky too?
They could be, yeah. Online auctions can be a great way to find cool stuff for cheap, but there are also a lot of scammers out there. They might set up fake auctions or bid up the price themselves to trick people, or they'll sell fakes and then vanish after they get paid.
Wow, so what should you do if you're thinking about bidding on jewelry online?
Do your research on the seller, look at their ratings, their history, and read everything about the auction very carefully. And don't be afraid to ask for more information.
And is it safe to pay through the auction website?
Most of the big auction sites have buyer protection, but it's always best to use a secure payment method like PayPal or a credit card that has purchase protection. Never wire money or pay someone directly if you don't know them.
Okay, so online auctions, you got to be extra careful. Now, before we move on, I want to talk a little bit more about lab-grown diamonds. We were talking about how they can be passed off as real diamonds, but there's also the ethical side of things, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Lab-grown diamonds are often presented as a more ethical choice because they don't have the same environmental and social impact as mining. But the industry is still pretty new, and we don't know everything about their footprint and labor practices yet.
So it's complicated.
Yeah, it's not black and white. Like with any purchase, you got to be informed. Do your homework and decide what's important to you. Think about where the energy to make the diamond came from, what the working conditions are like at the factory, and how transparent the whole process is.
So it really all comes back to being an informed consumer.
Exactly. Ask questions, be critical, don't just accept things the way they are.
Great advice. So I think the big takeaway here is that knowledge is your best protection against scams. The more you know about the tricks they use, the better you'll be at spotting them and staying safe.
Absolutely.
Mm.
But it's not just about the facts. It's also about your own emotions. Be aware of how they can be manipulated. Trust your gut, be skeptical, and if something feels off, walk away.
That's so true. Now let's take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll look at what you can do if you've been a victim of jewelry fraud and how to report it.
That's a great idea. Let's give our listeners the tools they need to fight back and get their sparkle back.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've spent this episode digging deep into the world of jewelry fraud, uncovering the scams that can take the shine off even the most beautiful jewels. But before we wrap things up, we want to leave you feeling empowered, not just aware. So let's talk about what you can do if you find yourself a victim of jewelry fraud.
You know, it's important to remember that you're not alone. Jewelry fraud is way more common than people realize, and there are resources out there to help you through it.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. What's the first thing someone should do if they think they've been scammed?
Well, like we talked about before, documentation is key. Gather any evidence you have, like receipts, certificates, photos of the jewelry, any communication with the seller. If it happened online, take screenshots of the website, the product listing, emails, messages, anything like that. It's all about building a strong case.
Okay, so it's like gathering clues for a detective case, but then what do you do with all that evidence?
If it was an online scam, you can report it to the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC. They have a website, reportfraud.ftc.gov. They have a whole team that investigates online scams, and they work hard to shut down those shady operations.
Okay, and what about stolen jewelry? Who do you report that to?
If you've had jewelry stolen, the first thing you should do is call your local police department. They'll walk you through filing a police report, which is super important for your insurance and for improving the chances of getting your jewelry back.
And what about insurance claims? Like, what if you think someone's filing a fraudulent claim?
If you suspect any kind of insurance fraud, you need to contact your insurance provider right away. They have special investigators who are trained to spot and prevent insurance fraud.
So different types of fraud, different places to report it, makes sense. What about general complaints against jewelers? Are there any resources for that?
Absolutely. If you have a complaint about a jeweler or a store, you can contact your state or local consumer protection agency. They can help you resolve disputes, they can investigate the complaint, and they can take action against businesses that are doing shady things.
Okay, so there are options depending on what happened. But it's not just about the money, it's about the emotional impact too. Being scammed can make you feel betrayed and violated.
You're right. Jewelry can hold so much sentimental value, and having something stolen or realizing you've been tricked can be devastating. So it's important to acknowledge those feelings and reach out for support if you need it.
Yeah, where can people find that kind of support?
There are a lot of online forums and support groups where people share their experiences with jewelry scams and offer advice and support to each other. It can be really helpful to talk to people who understand what you're going through.
It's a good reminder that you're not alone. And it's okay to feel vulnerable. Scammers are really good at what they do, and anyone can fall victim to their tricks.
That's so true. It's not about being smart or naive. These scams are sophisticated, and they use powerful psychological tactics.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered reporting channels, support resources, and the importance of being kind to yourself. What's the key message here? What do we want our listeners to take away from this?
I think the most important thing to remember is that you have rights, and you don't have to stay silent. If you've been scammed, there are things you can do to get justice, to recover your losses, and to feel safe again.
That's a powerful message. It's about turning a bad experience into something positive.
Exactly. By reporting these scams, by sharing your story, and by supporting others who have been through it, you can help raise awareness and make it harder for scammers to keep doing this.
It's about taking back your power and saying enough is enough.
Yes. And it's about remembering that even though there's a lot of deception out there, the real beauty of jewelry, the joy it brings, the memories it holds, those things can never be truly tarnished.
That's a beautiful thought. And on that note, we'll bring this deep dive to a close. We hope this episode has left you feeling informed, empowered, and ready to navigate the world of jewelry with confidence and a sharp eye.
Remember, knowledge is your most precious gem. Use it wisely and keep shining.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep exploring.